Welcome to the February 4th Board of Education meeting. Let's please stand while the district clerk will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. I am filling in for Catherine Dean, who's not able to attend today, so bear with me. So I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of the approval of the minutes.
We first got to do the agenda.
Oh, am I already on the wrong one?
It's the approval of the agenda first.
Oh,
B.
okay. So,
You were the consent agenda.
yeah, I jumped ahead.
Okay.
I have a motion to approve the agenda for today. Thank you. I'm still not seeing where that is. Let's see. Oh, this is, okay.
And vote.
Now we're in the,
And we got to vote.
oh. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we'd like to motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes from the January 21st meeting, the acceptance of the recommendation for the Committee of Special Education, the acceptance of the recommendation from the Committee on Preschool Education, the acceptance of the recommendation from the Superintendent for personnel changes, the request to approve the recommended bidder, Joseph Fillin, the request to approve the recommended bidder for accredited lock and door hardware, a request to approve the recommended bidder, ME Engineering PC, per the campus construction RFP.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, all in favor. We have no treasury report. We have a number of special reports today. The first one, which is a great treat, will be the Mosaics Club, which is led the club's member students, Leslie Mahoney, Jordan Gabriano, and Jennifer Pravone.
So you will have come on up,
Yep.
students and whoever's presenting.
Yeah, come on up.
Those of you that are presenting, bring your chairs with you, right?
Yep. It's okay.
Those of you who are not,
Z on the spot that our wonderful board member over here is telling me how excited she is to have students present, that this is awesome. So it's a reminder for our students presenting that everybody up here is very excited, because I get told a lot that we need more students presenting, and I'm so excited that you're here. I will not ruin anything, but you guys do incredible work for the high school and the district, and I'm so happy you're here. See, if you whisper now, I'm just going to share what you say.
clicker.
I will.
Are you okay with us clicking?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you to the board for inviting us to come and present. We are very excited to have the opportunity to present with you. So this is a large snapshot of our Mosaics Club, and we are going to share with you how we came to be, some of the ways that we educate the faculty the students at PHS, and then some of the exciting things that we have in the future. And I will start by doing some, I did it somehow before. There we go. So how Mosaics came to be. In 2015-16, PHS was one of the schools that was invited to participate in the first Student Summit on Race at Irondequoit High School. And Dr. Putnam, I remember him saying to me, there's this event, it's at Irondequoit High School, not really sure what it's about. Let's see if we can get some kids together who are interested in talking about diversity. And we went, and it was probably one of the most exciting days of my career. The students were so excited to begin these types of conversations around different racial issues and issues related to diversity. And looking back as we prepared this PowerPoint, the students will tell you it was emotional for me because sometimes you get caught up in all that's going on, and you forget how the impact that our students had at that first Student Summit on Race. The students that were with Dr. Putnam and I looked at us and said, we have an idea. And what's the idea? We'd like to keep the momentum going. Can we offer to host a second Student Summit on Race? And Dr. Putnam and I said, sure, we don't know where we'll have it or what it'll look like, but sure, we'll figure it out. And we are now there are 2 Student Summit on Races each year. And there's one in the fall and one in the spring. And they are so large that they have had to be moved to the Rochester Convention Center. We've been in some other large venues. The number of schools increases. Schools as far away as the Buffalo area have come. And it's very impressive that, each day I take pride in these students, but looking back, it's incredible, the impact. So I am going to stop talking, which, as all of you know, is difficult for me to do, and I am going to turn the presentation over to the students.
Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm a senior at PHS, and I was there for the film, I'm Not a Racist, Am I? And so for me as a freshman, this was the first look of anything regarding diversity or race issues in Penfield had come up. And for me, that was really exciting. As a minority student, I really appreciate seeing diversity in Penfield. And it's really important to me and my family to make sure that our voices are heard. And I feel like the film was the very first step for us to do that. I also went to the third, Student Summit, which is when we then first started our Mosaics Club with some of the older students. And then from there, we decided that we wanted to be a diversity club to educate the students and the teachers and create a community for everyone that was open-minded when talking about racial issues and diversity issues, and making sure everyone had a voice and could be heard. And then Dr. Maloney and Dr. Putnam have been very instrumental in making sure that they facilitate a space for us to do that.
So this vision statement, I'm Najlee, I'm also a senior at Penfield High School. This vision statement was created by an entire team of students following one of our summits, and we kept meeting after that. It was created by an entire team of students, myself included, 4 years ago. Our goal was to verbalize our hopes for the future and our purpose for coming together. Our vision statement reads, the purpose of the PHS Mosaics Club is to promote awareness of and appreciation for racial diversity within Penfield High School. This organization will create opportunities for education and comfortable discussion between staff and students about racial diversities.
Hello, my name is Adam Can. I'm a sophomore at Penfield High School. The second part of the Mosaic Club's vision is to engage faculty and students in the ongoing challenge of making our school welcoming to all races and backgrounds. As a minority student growing up and becoming a person in a primarily non-diverse area, it's extremely hard to just find yourself in a community where you don't see a lot of people who look like you or share the same experiences as you. And school, a place where you are supposed to feel safe and supposed to feel supported, and you're there most of the time. It's very uplifting to have adults and other administrators who can understand, or if they can't understand, they can listen to you and try to help you. And then the curriculum also reflects the district's willing to learn and change.
Hi, my name is this on? Okay. Hi, my name is Nora Can. I'm a freshman at Penfield High School, and the third part of our mission statement is to inspire students and staff to appreciate each person for who they are and who they can be. As Adam mentioned before, it's really important for students of color to have administrators and teachers and staff to help us feel valued and important and appreciate who we are, and help us really uplift our differences and just make us feel included.
Hi, my name is Paige Fletcher. I'm a senior at Penfield High School. So in the year of 2017-18, we facilitated the table tape down activity, which was a way to, what we did was we put scenario cards down on cafeteria and commons tables, and what we wanted students to do was find a way to discuss difficult topics of racial and diversity issues in PHS and across the nation.
And I am filling in for Yakorn, who is one of our students in Mosaics. She had a very exciting celebration for her family that popped up quickly today, and so she wrote what she had wanted to say, and so I will read her statement. The urban-suburban bus schedule initially started with picking up students at 2:15. So students who were in the urban-suburban program were unable to stay after school. And when the kids were picked up at 2:15, they then went to Bay Trail and waited at Bay Trail for the Bay Trail dismissal at 2:50. And as Yas says, many of us urban suburban students found this 30 to 40 minute time gap as a time to stay after they could to attend clubs or seek academic help. As students, we came up with the plan to switch the pickup schedule. They came up with the plan, they presented it to myself and to Felicia Smith, the person who leads urban suburban, and the plan was urban suburban buses would pick up Bay Trail students at 2:50 and then come to the high school. So high school students would be able to stay after from 2:15 till about 2:55, 3 o'clock. With the help of urban suburban and Penfield administration, this plan became a reality. This has equipped urban suburban high school students to increase involvement in PHS and strengthen academic goals.
I'm Melissa Hervey. I'm a sophomore here. Last year we wanted to see The Hate U Give because we heard of the experiences that the characters went through this movie and that it reflected what Penfield students went through every day. To elaborate on this, Star, who's the main character, has to code switch her mindset depending on where she is in the given moment. In her school, she has to be the nice black girl, where in her home, she has to drop the nice persona and become a hardened, tougher character. And this is parallel to many of the experiences that students here in Penfield have to go through because the culture between their home life and school life is so different. After seeing this movie, we also wanted to raise awareness on this issue and others by sharing our experiences and answering questions during the faculty meeting of last year.
This faculty meeting was a huge learning experience for both the students and the faculty members and us students that facilitated this meeting. Prior to the meeting, we had faculty members anonymously send questions and concerns regarding racial issues in the classroom and certain things and situations they had seen. And we would then take those concerns and questions and answer them within the faculty meeting. Additionally, we used personal experiences at PHS to create scenario cards that we had the faculty members work through. a lot of those scenarios were real life experiences. Myself had a personal experience that we put inside the cards, and it was things ranging from how do you act when you hear a racial slur being used in the hallway or in the classroom? How do you prep your class when you're reading a book and a racial slur comes up? And how do you react when you as a coach hear your player or another player yell a racial slur during a game? Our goal with this meeting was to create an environment where all students are comfortable and teachers are comfortable, educate the faculty on how to create and facilitate conversations on race and diversity, and develop an awareness of racial conflict and issues in the classroom. For me as a minority student and as Latina, which is one of the smallest populations at Penfield High School, this was really important. I know that my voice isn't always heard. We are very rare and hard to find within the school, and without a faculty member that looked like me or came from the same background as I did, it was hard for me to connect with certain faculty members. And this was a way to open that door for not only myself, but for my peers also.
Hi, my name is Ian Black, and I'm a freshman at PHS. And recently we created a morning show announcement about racial slurs to improve school culture. And it talked about the misuse of the N-word and how it affected us. And how it affected us, and it gave us a chance to explain how we were feeling and how we need to change things, and that some things, like, we need to understand how other people feel and how to improve it and prevent from others getting hurt.
My name is Maria Huber, and I'm a sophomore at PHS. Our Indian Landing Mentorship Program is a way to kind of facilitate the transition that urban-suburban kids at the elementary school level have to go through when they're transitioning into a new learning environment. That can be kind of scary, and it can make them feel as if they don't really have anybody around them who has had the same experience as them and who has kind of felt that sense of newness and scary. And we just wanted to give them a high school buddy that can kind of help facilitate that transition and share their experiences and make them feel like they're not completely alone. In addition, at Indian Landing, we wanted to give the faculty the opportunity to kind of facilitate a discussion about race and to learn more about how to prevent or address an issue of race when it comes up in the classroom.
Hi, my name is Deja Butler, and I'm a freshman. And PHS wanted to host their first day of diversity, and it's basically, the goal of the day of diversity is to PHS is hosting their first day of diversity on April 13th, 2020, and the main speakers are Pardeep Kalika and Arno Michaelis, and Anna will talk about the goals.
All right. I'm Anna Myrie, and I'm a freshman. So basically, the goals and the structure of the day is to promote discussion and empathy breakout sessions with student choice. So basically, it's supposed to encourage students to talk about things more openly, if they want to. So that's basically.
See why these guys make me proud on a daily basis? I promised Dr. Pundam I wouldn't cry, so I'm trying very hard not to. But we are excited. We decided that this audience would be the world premiere of our morning show announcement. So you get to see our morning show announcement prior to the rest of PHS.
we start it over once we get the sound set? Whenever we have these difficulties with technology, I typically like to sing a song.
Oh, God.
As they're just working, I want to make a comment, and it's to these students, it's to the board, it's to our community who watches. You know, when I meet with these Mosaics students and with the teachers and Dr. Maloney, I'm unfortunately reminded, because of watching the news, is that we live in a world of racism and bias. We can't pretend it's not there. It's everywhere. And I always struggle as a school superintendent is I can't control the world. I can't do it. I'd like to. I think it would be a great world if I could control it all. But we can as a school district, and the board is instrumental in this, is we can strive to create a world our students deserve within the walls of all of our buildings. And so these young adults, these Mosaic students, now and in the future, and in the past, the ones who were with us, who have graduated, who went to those first Rock to Change events, you guys are absolute change agents. And I don't say that lightly, but working to change our high school and our district to bring awareness and have these really difficult conversations that I tend to find adults have a harder time having than teenagers. Pushing for that, working towards it, not giving up, truly to me is going to be incredible change for the world beyond our school. You will hopefully take all of this advocacy and this work and connections and relationship building and bring it to the world outside. And if we do this enough and enough schools get behind it, I feel comfortable for the world that I will retire in and you guys can take care of me in a nursing home someday. I honestly just am so proud of the work that you guys have done and continue to do. And this isn't like an end. It's not like, okay, we've done this, so now it's all set and we've solved everything. This is ongoing, and the fact that you've got seniors all the way through 9th graders here and a great group of kids I can attest to from kindergarten on coming up to work with this club and this group is incredible. And I know we've got Ms. Pavone and Mr. Garbarino in the back. They're very quiet. They have an easier time not talking, but they're amazing. And they work so daily with these kids and all kids and all students to make sure they have a voice. So I had to, just like Dr. Maloney, I can't go too long without talking. It's part of being a superintendent. But I'm very, very proud, and I know the board is, and our community should be, in terms of what you guys have done. Is that enough filler for you?
Find out. Questions while we're waiting?
Well, maybe.
The N-word bears a lot of weight, and people don't recognize that when they use it.
The N-word is a word that shouldn't be used to harm others. It's a word that symbolizes our past. Even when someone uses it as a joke, it still hurts because I feel like it defines me in their image, something I'm not.
The N-word is very disrespectful to African Americans because it has impacted many people of color negatively and should not be used in any way that is offensive. The N-word is a racial slur, whether or not it is meant to be hurtful. It's never okay to use it in any situation. When someone I trust uses the N-word, it makes me lose respect for that individual because it is not an okay word to use, no matter what the situation is. When I hear someone I trust use the N-word, I immediately lose trust in them. The N-word has a lot of history behind it, and people need to realize its significance and impact on people of color.
When I hear someone I trust use the N-word, I know I'm less safer than I thought I was, because if they think that word can be used so lightly, then I know they're less likely to respect me and my peers.
When I hear the N-word used by those with privilege due to race, it angers me, because many people don't know the history of it and its dark roots. But when I hear people of color or minorities use it against each other, it saddens me, because as minorities, we're supposed to come together to support each other, rather than divide ourselves.
When I hear the N-word being used in school, it reminds me of when the word was used to belittle my ancestors and to separate them from others who believe they have the right to separate, discriminate, and abuse us.
The N-word brings back a history of the black community that made us feel less than what we are. It was made to make us feel less than humans, and hearing it loosely is unfortunate because no one thinks of the history behind it or the people that it offends.
The N-word is a word that has a lot of racist history behind it. I believe that if you're not a person of color, you shouldn't use it because we took a word that made us feel like we weren't human and turned it into a positive word to lift other people up.
The N-word is like a jump rope. In the hands of those using an A ending, it can be used to bring joy and a sense of family. But when it is used with a hard ER, it symbolizes a weapon, like a whip, and brings up a past full of pain and hurt.
When I hear the N-word, I think of Emmett Till and the thousands of other black men, boys, women, and girls killed in unlawful lynchings throughout the U.S. I think of that being the last word my ancestors heard. It's a heavy, complicated word, and it was created to make us feel little and less than. But I know my worth and where and what my people came from, not what they were forced into.
The N-word was used to bring colored people down and belittle them into thinking they were nothing when they were and still are kings and queens.
So, board, have any questions for the club? Or comments? Barb?
Wow. And then second, can anybody join the club? Yes. Yes.
Other side. Monday afternoons, Mrs. Babby. Monday afternoons, 2:20, up in H16. Actually, you can just come to the back door and it's right, we can see you. Yep.
Anything else? All right. I would just like to thank you. I think it's very impressive in how you've taken such a constructive approach to addressing this. One of the things that the board and the district do, and as part of our mission, is to work with our community to make sure that our district serves the community. The school in itself, and you as a students, you're your own community. And what you've done is you've taken that step to really shape your community for the better. And I think it's laudable. It's something that I think all students should do, take control of their own community, and I applaud you for it. I hope you come back again when you next year or even before if you have something you'd like to share with us.
Thank you. And students, if you can join me in giving another round of applause for Mr. Garbarino and Ms. Pavone. Without them, they are like lighthouses. They make that beacon that we follow. So thank you so much.
How do you get one of your shirts?
I'd like to really know that myself, because I thought I was on a list, but I guess not.
Okay.
No.
Actually,
can you point out, I don't know if somebody's comfortable standing up and showing the shirt to the board?
and Adam created the shirt.
Awesome.
We'll be taking sizes. We'll send shirts over.
They really are cool.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, students.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I know we're transitioning, but I apologize. I just also want to thank, there's a number of parents in the audience who probably either transported their child or are here to support their child. And I know it's a little late, but could we get a round of applause? Because we can't do this without parents too, so thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have a textbook presentation. Paul Gabby, Lisa Henry, and Katie Varley. Will you please come on up? And these are English and one social studies book.
It's a tough act to follow. Lisa, you need a chair? Sorry, here. And thank you for putting us early in the agenda, because as a social studies guy, I got to go look at Iowa and State of the Union starts. So we'll get right to the point. I guess I'm batting leadoff tonight. So I'm Paul Gaby. I teach advanced placement U.S. government politics and economics. Ms. Zhao is one of my students here. Ms. Santiago, you've got to rush home. Speech starts. You got an hour and a half. So we have used in our class, for the 25 years that I've taught the class, we've used the same book. It's American Government, John DeLulio and James Q. Wilson. And Major Justin McCarthy, who also teaches the class and couldn't be with us tonight because he is off serving our country for the next 3 days. We decided it was a good time to make a change because, again, we've used this text for about 25 years. So we looked through a bunch of texts, and we've decided on a new one, American Government, Roots and Reform. The two authors, Karen O'Connor, she's a professor from American University. The other author, Larry Sabato, he's the expert, other than myself, the expert in the field. He's from the University of Virginia, and if you watch the Sunday morning political shows, when they need somebody, he's the guy. So in terms of a content piece, he's about as good as it gets. And because our content changes like constantly, like on a minute-by-minute basis, we don't struggle, but we have to be very considered in terms of what we use for the material in the class. So this is the most up-to-date material available. It does cover the 2016 presidential election with President Trump. It kind of foreshadows the 2018 legislative election with people like AOC and things like that. So we've got that, and then we kind of supplement, with what we need to do in class with some other resources that we have. A couple things just very quickly about the book. It's structured like our previous book, so for us, in terms of teaching it and using it, it kind of follows along with what we need to do. From a student perspective, the only drawback to the previous book, American Government, was it was pretty daunting. It's kind of the standard of the industry at college political science classes, but it's a hefty tome. This is a little bit more student-friendly. The supplementary material's great. We're going to have some online access with this because the AP test itself has moved to kind of more critical thinking with the charts and the graphs that are in here, again, along with the supplemental material. I think it serves our students who take the AP well, and it corresponds with the new structure that the College Board has put in for the AP exam, which started last spring. And because we have a number of students who are looking at pre-law, government, political science, this is kind of the standard of the industry, and this is what they would get in college for an entry-level college class. So I think that they'll see a real you know, we do ask our students that go into this field, do you feel prepared at college entering after this particular class? And we're very pleased over the years that that seems to be the case. So, anything from me? Sure.
So can you hear me?
Yep.
What does the book cover more precisely?
It goes everything. It starts off with the roots of our governmental structure. So it really starts with Enlightenment age ideas and kind of piggybacks on things that the kids would have gotten in World History 1. So Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. Covers that, political socialization, so where Americans get their political ideals from, and then spends a large chunk on the legislative, executive, judicial branch along with the bureaucracies, deals with a chapter of foreign policy, deals with some economic policy, but when we kind of deal with that in the economic part of the class, political parties, media, campaign and elections. Those are really the big lobbies and special interest groups as well.
This is for the 12th graders?
Yes, this is 12th grade. Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm going next. My name is Katie Barley, and I teach 7th grade English at Bay Trail. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. This year has been a year of change in 7th grade English, and we are looking forward to hopefully adding 4 new modern book titles to our curriculum for the end of the year. Choice is a motivating factor in reading for students, so our students will be able to pick from one of the 4 textbooks for this unit on change, adversity, and conflict. We have Restart by Gordon Corman, Refugee by Alan Gratz, Fish in a Tree by Linda Millay Hunt, and Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. Fish in a Tree is about a young girl named Allie who has really been pretending that she has been stupid for many years, but in fact that's not the case. She's incredibly smart. However, she has something called dyslexia, where she reads words backwards, she mixes letters up, and she finally has a teacher that believes in her and understands what her issues are, and he really changes her life. The second book is Restart by Gordon Corman, and this one is about a young boy who wakes up from a coma and he has amnesia, and he realizes that before this injury that he faced, that he was a merciless bully. And the question really is, will he be able to have a restart? Will he be able to have a redo and change his life for the better? The next book is Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan, and it's about 12-year-old Willow Chance, who is a genius but has always had problems connecting with her peers. Her parents tragically die in a car accident, and she is forced to live with a family who looks very different from her and who also acts very differently. So the question we'll answer is, how is she able to adjust to her life, her new life with this new family? And lastly, Refugee by Alan Gratz tells the story of 3 refugee children and from different time periods, Joseph, a young Jewish boy who is fleeing Nazi Germany with his family on a ship to Cuba, a young Cuban girl who leaves Cuba to escape Fidel Castro's ruthless dictatorship in the 90s, and she leaves on a very small boat to get to America, and Mahmoud, who is a Syrian boy in 2015, who leaves his country with his family to flee to Europe after his country has been torn apart by unspeakable violence. The common thread between each of these novels is that each character faces unimaginable adversity and conflict, and each character deals with changes, some devastating and some changes for the better. As our students read and analyze these novels, they will consider the following essential questions in their discussion groups. What truths about themselves and about others can fiction reveal? How might it feel to live through a conflict that disrupts your way of life? And lastly, how does an individual's point of view affect the way they deal with conflict? So because social emotional learning is such an important piece of the positive growth and development in each child, we are hoping that they come away with some knowledge about how to deal with adversity and conflict, especially as 7th graders. In the upcoming years, they're going to be facing things that they unfortunately never thought they would. So what supports are available to help one overcome adversity? That overcoming adversity, conflict, and change involves being persistent, asking for help when needed, problem solving, self-control, emotional regulation, and also context. So thank you so much for your consideration and also for listening. Yes. Any questions?
Why don't you go ahead with your books as well?
Sure.
Oh, yes, sir. Teacher voice.
Hi, my name is Lisa Henry. I am an English teacher and the chair of the English department at the high school. I never minded working in the tomato harvest. You're under the hot sun for hours. You get pains in your back and your waist from being doubled over, and your hands cramp because you have to take care not to damage the fruit. But the color of the fruit is beautiful, and even though you're under the sun all day, you get time to think. I first started learning about the streets at 3 years old, maybe 4. My brothers would come in the house and tell me, "Here, come put this gun up," and so I'd hide their gun for them. These 2 excerpts come from the books we're asking for approval. High-Rise Stories, Voices from Chicago Public Housing, and Underground America, Narratives of Undocumented Lives, are books that we'd like to use in our 11th grade American Regions classes. 11th grade focuses on American literature, and one of our units is analyzing the American dream. Some of the other texts we use in that unit include The Great Gatsby and Between the World and Me. Mr. Baxter, one of our fabulous 11th grade teachers, would like to further develop this unit for the 11th grade team with an assignment that focuses on oral histories and first-person accounts. Students would read selections from these 2 texts about many different kinds of people with different views of the American dream. In addition, they would identify specific issues in the first-person accounts to research and use as the basis for a research paper. One of the innovative ideas also includes having students learn about oral histories by interviewing and then writing their own parents' stories. Students would also have the chance to write their own personal oral histories. Reading these oral histories and first-person accounts will help our students look deeper than stereotypes and help them understand the connections that we all have as humans. We're excited about this focus to connect real-world issues with research and writing. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Get on the board. Mine one. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that I will put a plug in for Refugee. It's absolutely a powerful, powerful book.
I cried.
And
It's very
it's
powerful.
amazing.
Yep.
And I have a 7th grader who read it first, so it's pretty amazing. I'm glad it's on there. I haven't read all the others, and I will wait. I'll visit Mr. Gaby's room to get like a synopsis on your favorite parts.
Doors always open.
All right. I really do appreciate it. I just know, you guys put so much work into this, and Kristen Williamson is behind you as our Director of Humanities, and the amount of work that goes into, for the board's knowledge before a book is selected. It's not just going to Amazon, finding a good book and throwing it out there, but it's a lot of work and development and thought process. So I know it's not just the 3 of you, but everybody else back at the schools. Thank you very much, and I love seeing just the updated books and different viewpoints, and I think that's so important, especially because you just followed our incredible Mosaic students, and so it's, to me, I see that parallel, which I think is really cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And
Thank you.
I'd like to
Good night.
elaborate.
Wait, Mark's not done.
I just wanted to elaborate what Tom had to say, that there is great, you can tell there's great care in selecting the books and how you really want to use those to strengthen your curricula. And we appreciate the time that you and all your colleagues put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, we're going to talk about the Next Generation Learning Standards with Nicole Whitehead and Kristen Williamson.
Mosaic student presentation, incredible textbook, and now everybody's favorite, Next Generation Learning Standards.
So this is like Common Core 2.0?
Well,
3.5.
Hello. All right, so once again, I'm Kristen Williamson, Director of Humanities. And this is Nicole
Nicole
Whitehead,
Whitehead.
Director. I got you. Director of
Thank
STEAM.
you. I was pulling up my notes.
Real team effort.
Mhm.
So we are here tonight to talk about the next generation standards. I will cover the changes to the ELA standards, and then Nicole will walk you through the math and science standards as well. So I wanted to start, I'm a former kindergarten teacher, so there's a theme, it's a journey. Join us. I wanted to start with sort of the roadmap, the overview of the timeline of those standard changes. So they were released in 2018, and we quickly made the shift with our youngest learners. So in the summer of 2018, we shifted our K-1 ELA curriculum to align to those new standards. And then last summer, 2019, we did the same with our second grade curriculum. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But technically, we are ahead of the state's roadmap in that area. So this school year and then this summer is our big shift for 3 through 8 curriculum. They will work to align their curriculum to the new standards. And part of the rationale for that is the new state tests aligned to the next generation standards will start next spring. After that, we'll continue to look at that curriculum, refine the K-8 curriculum, but we'll begin to think about shifts in the high school because the first administration of the new regions will be in 2024. We will have the option to take it then, with the final administration of the Common Core regions being in 2025. So that's sort of the journey. Our first step, we're going to dig into those early learning standards, which are the K-2 ELA standards. The state's really asking us to focus on a couple of things, whole student, so good for us, we're there. Developmentally appropriate instruction, research-based instruction, of course, and then really honing in on those foundational reading skills. So I'm going to show you kind of what we've been doing so far. I think most of you have heard me talk about LETTERS, which stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. It is basically bringing the research around reading instruction into the hands of teachers. So we've been doing that for a couple of years, and I'm proud to say all of our K-2 teachers have received training in reading, spelling, vocabulary, comprehension, things like that. As I already mentioned, they've already shifted their curriculum, so that little tiny document is one of our curriculum documents. They're fully aligned to the next generation standards already. And then finally, as you know, we use Super Kids now, again, fully aligned to the next generation standards, and certainly focuses on those foundational reading skills, making sure the students are prepared to decode and spell on grade level. In addition, we've taken to heart the whole child idea and the developmentally appropriate practice at the K-2 level. I'm giving you one example. We recently did a professional development training with teachers on purposeful play and how you can do that in the context of direct phonics instruction. So in the lower left, you see a student climbing across a ladder, so a lot of gross motor movement. It's playful, but as that student moves along the ladder, she's decoding words that she's been taught how to blend the sounds up. Moving on to that 3-8 journey, the state's asking us to really focus on classroom discussion, oral dialogue, vocabulary and written language, again, the research-based instruction, and really having students access to complex grade level texts that are diverse in theme, characters, perspectives. So we have, again, many of our 3-8 teachers have attended LETTERS training. A lot of that for them is focusing on vocabulary development. What does the research say in regard to the best way to teach vocabulary, comprehension, things like that. And then we're really, we've already begun to take the time to really look at the books that we're bringing to the board. I feel like I'm on repeat here. You just saw a great example of it. But that diversity in character, that diversity in experience theme, things like that. They have begun, Katie kind of talked about a unit that they worked on this year that's aligned to the next generation standards. So they've begun that work with their curriculum maps, but again, this summer will be a big summer for them to continue to ensure that they're in full alignment with those standards. And then our next stop will be PHS. What the state is asking us to do is similar in regard to the big shifts. And I would say PHS, they don't have to start yet, but they already have. So again, many of our teachers have attended the letters training. I loved having some of our English staff in the vocabulary module. It wasn't intimidating in any way. But great to have them there providing their input. And again, we're really looking at the complexity of the text that they're bringing and the diversity in the text that they're bringing. So you saw many examples of that tonight. There's some out there that you all approved last year. But I have no doubt with the work we've done, K2, continue to do 3-8, and what's coming up for the high school, that not only will our students be prepared for that new exam in 2024 or 2025, but they're going to be more than ready for whatever awaits them after that. So I'm going to shift it over to Nicole.
Okay. So as you can see here, our roadmap for math is a little bit more complex. And our teachers have been working really hard over the last few years trying to make sure that we are fully aligned in time for the new exams. The new standards were released at the exact same time for math as they were for ELA. We really spent a lot of last year doing capacity building with those standards, taking opportunities during conference days and curriculum writing for teachers to really dig deeper and do a lot of crosswalks between the old and the new. We actually started revising grade 6 over the summer. So even though the new standards don't come into effect until next fall, there are some 7th grade current standards that are moving to 6th grade. So if we had followed the state's advice to just implement next year, there would be a cohort of kids that would never get those standards. That was really important for us to make sure that there were not those gaps, because those standards were in statistics and probability, which again are worked on in 8th grade and then up and through the high school. So we're ahead of the game. And our students will be prepared for those changes. We will continue to build capacity, take advantage of professional development opportunities. We spend department meetings prioritizing standards, and we are in very good shape. Similar to English, we will have the first administration of the 3-8 exam will be next spring. So this year will be our last year of the Common Core. And then we start in June of 22 with the administration of the Algebra 1 Regents. Similar to the Common Core rollout, every year after that will be a new exam. So it does not all happen at once, which is great news for our students. It also allows us to have a sufficient amount of time for our high school department to focus on algebra first, and then geometry, and then algebra 2, and then pre-calc, which is really important because a lot of them teach more than one section. So this allows us to spread that out and do the heavy lifting over a longer period of time. And then my notes are on my phone, so I apologize. But I do have down that similar to the Common Core, they will be allowing students to take the old exam for Algebra 1 up until 2023, and then 2024 for geometry, and 2025 for Algebra 2. What we haven't decided yet is, as a district, will that be something that we would require all students to take both or not, or will we just have them take the new one, and then should they want to take the old one, they can. That's how we approached the Common Core when we switched from the old standards to Common Core. But we haven't had those discussions yet because we're a little bit ways away from that. So moving right along, in case you're interested in knowing what is it about the next gen standards that are different, the 4 main areas that the state has pointed out differences are in focus, coherence, rigor, and content, and I'm going to provide examples of each one. So for focus, we had some examples of standards being moved. For example, in grade 8, or an example of clarification is that in grade 8, solving systems algebraically are now being limited to just one equation containing at least one variable with a coefficient. And now I'm speaking math language that is really, but for our teachers, that's important for them to know because that changes the way in which they'll teach, and the examples that they'll give students to solve. They also split up some standards. So what used to be 3MD2, which was a measurement, is now going to be 3MD2A and 3MD2B, so that they're actually, it used to be measuring, estimating, adding and subtracting units, and now they're separating that out. Measuring and estimating and adding and subtracting units. So not major changes when we look at the focus. Those are things that we can look at curricularly and make shifts. They did some more splitting into other substandards, and then they added, as you can see to the right, notes and diagrams, which is really helpful for teachers when they are looking at instructional approaches. We already use a lot of these techniques to teach, so it kind of validates how we're already teaching, but it's very helpful for anybody new that those are now directly right in the standards. Moving on to coherence, they added new ones, which we always have to do that. And then we have the new language of explore. I like this because now it's not saying you need to introduce a concept and expect mastery by the end of the year. That's really important for children at our younger grades. For example, coins are now explored in kindergarten, but we don't really expect them to be more proficient until 1st and 2nd grade. So it's more of like an introduce. And I think that that's really helpful because I think there's a lot on the plate that we're asking of our kids. And so when we can kind of just tell students that we're exploring something, I think it relieves a little bit of the stress. And that continues throughout with even more sophisticated mathematical concepts. Moving on to rigor. Examples of that are, the new standards talk about the importance of procedural fluency, and that it's not just how fast somebody can perform an operation, that it is how fluid they are with it and how many different strategies and approaches they can have to it. So the new standards talk about that, which I think is also a nice addition to the standards. So, major changes, you can see right here that we now have order of operations in grade 5 instead of grade 3. I think that's very much more developmentally appropriate. In fact, I have 3rd grade teachers right now saying, oh my gosh, students are really struggling with that. How do we teach that? And the state heard that from teachers. And so kudos to them for listening to that, because it is really more of a more complex concept that should be looked at later on. Then we kind of did the reverse. We took a standard from 7th and moved it down to 6th, but it's really with simple probability, which when I first started teaching was actually in 5th grade. So I think it will be okay. Our students will be okay with that. And you can see some of the other changes there, that those are the big ones. So I think that we are in very good shape for our changes to math. Our students are going to be in an excellent shape and prepared for our exams, both the 3-8 next year and then our high school ones. We will have a lot of curriculum writing going on this summer, but it keeps me busy and out of trouble. So, moving on, science. So I know I've spoken a couple of times about the change to science. It's a really exciting time in science right now. We've been leading up to this since 2015, when awareness of the new standards was kind of brought to the table. We actually had the adoption in December of 2016. The district, being very proactive, approved the shifting of a TOSA position to the STEAM areas to support our shift across the district, which has been instrumental. And we have been doing a lot of in-house professional development, as well as offering and promoting out of the district professional development. A lot of our department meetings are spent on building the capacity of teachers around the new standards, and we have been doing a lot of curriculum writing as well. You can see all of that here. In fact, it's been so complex, we have a long roadmap. So it's really exciting that this year, 2020, is the last administration of the old science exam, which is great because that's always that last thing that teachers are holding on to, afraid to make the shift completely until the exam shift. So it's been great to be able to tell teachers that this is the last administration. And then the state listened to advice from teachers and administrators, and rather than double testing those students again next year, because the test is moving to grade 5, they're giving a year off for those students. That was great. We really advocated for that at the state level, and they listened, which is great. We do have 6th grade fully aligned this year right now to the new standards, because the first administration of the new 5th and 8th grade exam is in June 2022, which is our current 6th graders. And we have a very detailed implementation plan that then follows. As you can see, we have our Regents exams first debuting in June of 23 for Earth and Space, and now biology, which they're calling it biology again. It used to be living environment. We're going back to biology. And then in 2024, we have chemistry and physics. Got to keep it interesting. I really love this visual. It shows you, I'm going to show you the difference between the old standards and the new without going into too much detail. But the old standards, there was a priority of, or prioritization of memorizing. Memorize the parts of the cell, memorize the layers of the earth, memorize the life cycle, memorize the water cycle. That was a lot of the way we learned science. The actual doing science, ironically, students' favorite part was a lot less. What I love about the new standards is that so many years of research are what led up to the standards. And if you ever need something fun to read, you can read the Framework for Science Education. It's like 500 pages. But in that, they talk about the fact that research indicates that students are going to learn better when you're actually connecting concepts and having them do the science. That the actual content, that part that used to be the big rectangle, is now in the middle there. The disciplinary core ideas is just part of the learning. And that is why we call the new standards 3-dimensional. Those are the 3 dimensions. I really like this, this slide as well. It shows you on the left really how we learned science. And now what on the right is what the new standards are going to promote. And it just makes sense. And I think it's just good teaching. For example, we often learned things disconnected from real world phenomena. And now with the new standards, we're actually encouraging every unit to start with a real world phenomena, and then from there, dissect it into what is the concept behind here. I think that makes students much more engaged and interested in the learning that they're about to do. Other things that I like too is that sometimes there's a lot of questioning by students, and it's students that are having a lot of the conversation, less teacher talk and more of student discourse, which again I think becomes more meaningful for them. And I also really like the fact that they are doing a lot of modeling. Modeling is really important in the new standards. There's a lot of journal writing. So we're going to be able to assess students in very authentic ways. It's not your typical multiple choice and matching and that type of thing. Those will obviously still play a part, but the new assessments that the state is really kind of heading towards, that we're seeing glimpses of right now, are really tasks. That they would be given tasks and then have to break down those tasks. So what lies ahead, using that road theme still, is that we are starting our units by engaging students in real world phenomenon. We are trying to emphasize that students should be asking questions and having open-ended investigations. For example, instead of giving students the lab where the teacher knows what the student is going to find, we are now having students generate their own labs. So we give them a phenomena and then we say, okay, if you were to explore this, what kind of questions would you ask? What kind of variables are there? Now you design your own investigation. It's very, very exciting and it's very, very interesting. Oh,
Okay.
that's it.
Thank you. Board, any questions from the board? Barb?
So, looking at all of these things for science,
Yeah.
I'm excited about the other things too. But science, you spoke to me because I have this one thing.
Yes.
And yes, they already know what it is. The rooftop gardens.
The rooftop gardens. So
For-
it's interesting you bring that up because Shane's not here. I don't want to speak to her, but we started brainstorming some ideas, and I told her first step was talk to Alan because he's the one in charge. But depending on how that goes, 2 of our units at the elementary school are ecosystems and beehives. And so wouldn't it be neat to have bee pollinators and butterflies and tie the 2 together?
Would be.
Alan, please. But no stress there, Alan, no. But yeah, so that's something that we're looking at.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I had a question.
rest my case.
Did you have a question?
I did. About the math curriculum.
Yeah.
Trigonometry seems to have been lost, but actually has it been lost? Has it just been mixed in everything else?
Trigonometry still is there. It's just not at the same. That hasn't changed as much from the Common Core. And the reasoning behind that is that they feel that in the world that we live in right now, we need to have students more well-versed in statistics, that is something that is carried over to more careers than trigonometry. Trigonometry does come up in calculus and in our more advanced classes, but that was a state decision, and they've kind of staying firm on that because statistics is so important to so many careers and fields, they made that trade-off. And so we, needing to make sure our students are prepared for those exams, which are going to be heavy in statistics, we've had to follow suit. It's not lost completely. I can certainly, if you're interested, send you a copy of the standards where you could see where they appear, but there is still a more heavier emphasis on the statistics and probability.
Okay. So pre-calculus is not part of that system, though, of standards, correct?
Correct. Well, so pre-calculus, it's interesting. So pre-calculus, technically the standards go up to Algebra 2. So pre-calculus, there's no Regents exam for pre-calculus. So the local districts have a little bit more say over what they can put in their curriculum for pre-calculus. We really take the lead from our calculus teachers. And so we have a locally developed final. They don't take the Regents, but we really look at our pre-calculus curriculum and make sure that it is preparing our students for our Calculus A, AB, or Calculus BC, or Calc 3, because we do have a large number of students that go on. About a third of our class ends up taking those in more advanced classes because of our acceleration opportunities. I don't know if I answered your question, but so pre-calculus, there is a little bit more leniency about what we put in the curriculum, but we really do take our lead from the Calc A, B, and BC to make sure that they have the preparation they need.
Okay, last comment. So actually at the college level, you do need to know trigonometry for calculus to do the transcendental equations and such.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that might be lacking. I'm sort of watching it right now with my son in that pre-calc, but I am concerned that it's not adequate. It's a concern.
Noted, thank you. And I can take that back to our pre-calculus and calculus teachers. I can say with confidence that Jen Vibber, one of our calc teachers, and Dan List, she helps write the test, the AP calculus test. She actually is part of the small group of educators that scores it every year. So she is really making sure that our students are well prepared for calculus in college. So.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. You.
I'd just like to take a second to give kudos to Kristen and Nicole. The processes that they've engaged in with our staff to go through this and prepare to implement the next generation standards and prepare our students for these assessments has been highly collaborative. They're not top-down decisions. They roll this information out to the teachers. They talk with the teachers about the different decisions that they have to make through different K-12 teams and committees, and then they work with them to then develop the curricula. And they've done a great job of developing plans to avoid the cliffs that we saw when we shifted to the Common Core standards. If you'll recall, back in 2011-12, it was a shift, and what we saw was as we shifted to the new standards in 1 year, kids had huge gaps, and they struggled to meet the demands of the new curricula, and they struggled mightily on the new assessments. Now, because of the plans that these folks have helped lay out, we're phasing things in over time, so by the time our kids are taking the new assessments, we're pretty much fully ready to go, and they are prepared because they've had this early foundation laid to be successful moving on. So just kudos to them for the work they've done, and to the teacher leaders and teachers that they've worked with to make sure that we're set up for success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Now we know how Tom feels, because what I was going to say is that it's just clear that the implementation is much more thought out and measured than the Common Core, because the Common Core, as Jim said, you had a lot of, it was pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've had the time to do this, and it's clear you put a lot of effort into this, and it's a much more thoughtful implementation that will be less disruptive to the school and to the students. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, visitor speaking time. We have any speakers? Okay. Well, at every meeting we do offer an opportunity for visitors to come to speak. This is a designated time for district residents to bring their comments to the board. The board encourages residents to share their opinions, voice their concerns, and offer suggestions in a constructive atmosphere. Matters involving particular individuals or specific negotiations are not permitted during this session and should be addressed privately. There we go. With the board president or superintendent. Comments brought to the board will be taken under consideration. However, this is not the time when the board can answer questions or engage in dialogue. A request to speak form must be filled out prior to the start of the meeting and given to the district clerk. Speakers are expected to identify themselves with their names and addresses before presenting and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less. The board president reserves the right to limit the amount of visitor speaking time based on the length of the agenda. Written communication to the board is always encouraged. Olivia, the student representative, would you please give us your report?
All right, good evening. To start off our report at Harris Hill, Mr. LaFontaine's class had a constructive feedback session where students were able to share their views and ways that they thought would make Penfield a better place. Second graders at Harris Hill made an inspirational poster bulletin about the power of the word yet, where students shared things that they could not do yet. Fourth graders experienced what a school day was like in 1857 at Dayton's Corners one-room schoolhouse. First graders at Indian Landing visited the Penfield Public Library and learned about various reading programs that they offered and where to find suitable books for them. Students at Cobbles stayed after school, volunteered to paint murals for last Friday's Under the Sea dance. Meteorologist Glenn Johnson visited the third graders and gave a presentation on how he predicts weather. Students and their families at Scribner enjoyed yet another PTA pancake breakfast at Don's Original this past weekend, where students from the Student Council volunteered to serve families. Students all over Bay Trail are now using flexible seating, where students can learn and sit in comfy seats like couches and bean bags. A senior at Penfield High School, Barbara Buck, received a Section 5 scholarship check for gymnastics, where each sport recognizes one spectacular athlete from their Section 5 each season. Penfield High School Science Olympiad team earned a total of 18 medals at the regional competition and had many students coming in first in their category. Last week was our Sources of Strength Week, where students learned about different sources and hung up chain links that showcased how they use their sources in their everyday life. And these chain links were hung up all around the school. And lastly, at Penfield High School, our jazz fundraiser concert will be held this weekend on Friday and Saturday at 7:30 in the Penfield High School auditorium, and it will be featuring Grammy award-winning saxophonist Jeff Coffin. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Board, any questions? Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The superintendent's report.
Oh, I was worried about this.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Jim, do you got a clicker down there?
I don't.
Oh, did they?
Can I grab? I got it.
Just
Mark will sing a quick song.
The wheels.
All right. So for this evening, for superintendent reports, I do have a few student and staff honors. Levia touched on a couple, but I think I got a couple too. And then I do have a school resource officer update that I discussed I would do based on feedback I received from the Prestige article. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sansucci, who will be talking about the capital budget review, the capital budget portion of this budget for the 2020-2021 school year. So some wonderful kudos for our students. We have two Penfield High School students, Jasmine Kiley and Jessica Dawson, who've been named candidates for the 2020 U.S. Presidential Scholars Program, and they were among 4,500 students selected out of nearly 3.6 million seniors across the country. Scholars are selected on the basis of superior academic and artistic achievements, leadership qualities, strong character, and involvement in community and school activities. Approximately 600 semifinalists will be named in early April. So kudos to our two students, and we have our fingers crossed that you'll keep moving forward in the process. Senior portfolios, some of you maybe were able to attend the Friday event. Congratulations to the seniors whose artwork was showcased at the senior portfolio preparation reception. I won't read all their names, they're in the agenda and on the slide, but just that artwork is still hanging up around the school, and it's absolutely just amazing. Actually, behind me, I believe, is some of the artwork that was presented there. There we go. Okay. Science Olympiad, Levia mentioned, and so just again, kudos and congratulations to our high school Science Olympiad team. I'll just share something which I think is really neat, is that many of our Science Olympiad students at the high school actually are coaches for the middle school Science Olympiad team. So they go down and teach the kids what they need to know for the Science Olympiad, which is really, really neat, because we all know in that wonderful world of if you teach somebody, you retain 90% of that information. And so having our students at the high school teach our middle school students, it only helps them even more when they go to the Science Olympiad for high school. Again, artwork, just I'm absolutely amazing. Those pictures to the right there are our student jewelry creations. I mean, they're amazing. And so congratulations to the following PHS students on winning Scholastic Art Awards for the Northeast Art Region at Large in jewelry category. Delaney Cassidy won a gold key for her summer camp stargazing pendant. Maddie Kotra won a gold key and was nominated for an American Visions Award for her Rochesterian and Lilacs pendant. And Maddie's work will be going on to the national level competition. And Megan Solano, who won a silver key for her swimming ring and an honorable mention for earrings, Lawn Daisy Friendship. Just really amazing.
It is.
I do just have to say a word. We put this out on social media, and this is National School Counseling Week. We're celebrating it within our district. This year's theme is School Counselors Helping Build Better Humans, which I absolutely love, with a focus on resilience and the tremendous work of our counselors. Our counselors help students examine their abilities and talents, provide ways to enhance students' academic and social emotional development, and work with parents and colleagues to help students realize their full potential. Thank you to all of our counselors. We could not, as a district, do what we do without the incredible work of our school counselors from kindergarten through 12th grade, and they just do so much. Their day is different every single day, and they have to be ready for planful things and for the crisis situations that take place and be ready to step in and support students. And I'm just really, really honored to work in this district with just absolutely incredible counselors. So thank you, and hug a counselor, I guess. If you know one, send an email, say thank you. So this is where I just want to talk a little bit about the school resource officer update. So as a reminder, the January 2020 edition of the Penfield Prestige newsletter was mailed to all residents in mid-January. And we talked about a lot of things that we're doing district-wide for safety and security. But my superintendent message during the January Prestige was really focused on the district considering hiring a school resource officer. And in that letter, it's in the Prestige that is at your house or maybe in your recycling bin at this point. Hopefully not. But it's also online, so anybody watching can go online to our webpage, and all the Prestiges are there. It provided an overview of position and rationale. It also provided links to the recent Board of Ed presentations from Brandon Fox and Alan McNiff, who presented the audit results of our security audit by Armada. And also we had a presentation at a past school board meeting from representatives from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office who talked about the SRO program. My Prestige letter included an FAQ of some frequently asked questions, and I asked for thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, and since it hit the mailboxes up until this morning, I've gathered all the comments that came through to me, and I want to provide, as I promised, an overview to the board. So I received an overwhelming 13 emails and 2 mailed responses. I've also talked to a number of parents through PTAs, PAB, and in conversation. So of those 13 emails and 2 mailed responses, I received 9 responses were in full support of hiring an SRO. 4 responses expressed concern about hiring an SRO, and 2 responses did express concern, but then also provided suggestions that if the district were to consider hiring an SRO, here are some suggestions that they want to make sure the district is aware of. And I want to go through, I'm not going to call out specific emails or letters, but I do want to share, thanks Barb, I'm behind on my, wait, sorry, hang on. Yay! All right. So I just want to go over the responses in general, like I sort of went through all of them, and I have sort of 3 sections: concerns that were shared, positive and support that was shared, and suggestions that were made. And so, and I want to be honest, all of, these are all valid points, and so this leads to more information for the board to consider. So the concerns shared in the 4 emails and/or letter, really I summed up, looking through all of them, reading all of it, is that there is a feeling from some that there should be no guns in school, period. Even if it's with a deputy, an SRO, a police officer, there should just be no guns. There's also a concern of unconscious bias towards students of color, and that, we do live in a world, I mentioned earlier with Mosaics, that we live in a world that does have bias and does have racism, and we want to try to protect that in the walls of our school and try to build a culture that can enter and exit our schools and be successful. But there was a concern, valid, of unconscious bias towards students of color. There was a couple comments about the cost of an SRO and the impact on taxes. There was some comments on the feeling that there's inconclusive research on whether an SRO results in a truly safer school. There was a comment about having an SRO may send a message that schools aren't safe, because if they see a police officer, maybe some people will feel that therefore it's not a safe place, and that school should only be for education and not anything else. So valid concerns I want to share with the board. Comments that were of support shared is that the SRO provides a sense of enhanced security and safety. The SRO can act as a deterrent for violence. Somebody talked about the value for cost in their opinion, nominal increase to the staff budget that will deliver value far beyond the cost to the taxpayer. Support for our students and staff in light of recent local and national events at school. strong message to all that we believe in keeping students safe. I have another page for support because we did have 9, a little bit more on the support side. People wrote in that there was a peace of mind in knowing an SRO is in place for emergency situations. They specifically mentioned, if there were to be a threat, knowing that we already have an SRO in the building. They comments around the SRO building positive relationship with students, and it's someone for them to turn to, another trusted adult. There was a couple of comments wishing that it could have been added sooner. And there were, I want to call out, because Deputy Thurston, as we know, was in our high school last school year for several months, because the Monroe County Sheriff Baxter, actually asked us if we wanted one, and just to be safe with some situations or a situation we were dealing with. And I'm never going to turn down free things, so we said yes. And so there were 3 specific comments about specifically Deputy Thurston, who was stationed at the high school last year, and his ability to build positive connections with their children, and they wrote about that. From the 2 emails that were more of concern but sharing suggestions for the board to consider, the district consider, is that if there were to be a SRO, that there should be clear goals and procedures for that SRO, that there should be ongoing professional development for the school resource officer, that there should be meetings with student groups, teachers, staff, and the community to make sure that the SRO is introduced to everybody and understands everybody's point of view, and that the district should reassess the SR program each year to make sure that it's something that there is a cost to it. So based on the cost, if it were to move forward, that it should be reassessed like other positions in our district are. So we're here tonight after a lot of conversation around the SRO, and I've based a recommendation that I'm going to provide to the board tonight, and it's based on the Armada security audit that we've heard from and talked about, our ongoing discussions with the Monroe County Sheriff Office around the SRO program, feedback from districts that already employ SROs. I've spoken to a number of districts in our county, but also in Wayne County, where there is a larger number of SROs employed by districts. Written and verbal feedback from students, staff, and parents. So yes, I have the 15 official responses I've gotten, but number of conversations at PTAs, PAB, my listening sessions with Dr. Maloney at the high school where we got through all the juniors, and then we're working with all the seniors as well. I met with all the seniors and we're working with the juniors now. And so I'm making a recommendation this evening that the Penfield School District budget for the addition of 1 SRO to be located at PHS but utilized district-wide. So my recommendation is that we budget for this as we continue conversations. So to be clear for the board and also for the community, I asked Dr. Sansucci, based on my recommendation, to add the SRO position into the capital portion of the 2020-2021 budget that Dr. Sansucci will be presenting shortly. We need to budget for it. We need to be aware of it because it's something with that cost of about $100,000, we need to make sure that we're being planful. There's still time for further Board of Ed discussion, but the SRO will be built into the budget process for planning purposes. And then I also am making a recommendation that what will happen with this, based on board conversation, is the SRO position will remain in the capital budget through our conversations. And if the board is supporting that, then it will remain in our final budget that goes to the board for a vote. And then that budget would go to the voters on our May budget vote date, and that if the budget was approved by the voters, we had already earmarked funds for an SRO, and then we would move forward with the Monroe County Sheriff Office to go through their hiring process. And as a reminder, myself and another representative or more, we were looking at Brandon Fox, would be able to sit on the final interview when they whittle it down to the final 3 candidates. We'd be able to sit on and play a role in that decision, because as the Monroe County Sheriff Office has mentioned, and when they came here to present, they realized that this partnership needs to be one where the school district is playing a role in selecting the person who would be in the building. So at this point, it's in the budget. We're not there for the board to approve the final budget, and then ultimately it would go to the entire community as part of the budget that they vote on. The other piece I want to mention is that I'm going to make a recommendation. Now it's just preliminary, but if we move forward and after the May vote, if there's an SRO in there, and again, there's time for continued conversation, that my recommendation is also going to be that the district create an entrance plan for the SRO position, which would include, but also it could include these things, but more, is that there's a careful plan for the SRO to meet with specific student groups K-12, to meet with all faculty and staff district-wide, to meet with parent organizations district-wide, and for ongoing professional development, not just the required SRO professional development and national SRO professional development, but what else do we believe in strongly in Penfield? We're doing a lot with resiliency. We're doing a lot with restorative practice. And as we build that, I want to make sure that an SRO is aware of what we believe strongly in, the social emotional learning piece. A lot of that PD that we provide to teachers and administrators and staff, I would like a very clear plan that the SRO is involved in that so they understand really at the heart what does it mean to care for the whole student here in Penfield. And I want to call out, it's not in here, but in terms of meeting with students, we just heard from an incredible group of students in the Mosaics Club who talk about diversity and working to make change in our district, our community, and our world. Though that's one group I want to make sure that our SRO, if we have one, is working with. It's our students of color. It's the families of color. It's a conversation of how do we build positive connections and take away the stigma that an officer's here just to catch kids doing things wrong. Instead, it's, you heard from the Monroe County Sheriff Office, and which is why I'm here recommending it, it's all about the proactive relationship building and how they can stop things from happening before they happen. And then the same piece is meeting with our student groups of marginalized students. We have both at the Bay Trail and the high school students in the Gay Straight Alliance. I'm also very interested that whoever it is meeting with Scott Dressler and our special education team when we talk about how to interact with students with autism and students with disabilities and what does that look like, because students may react one way, and getting to know who those students are by name can really make a positive connection. And we saw that when Deputy Thurston was here, the connections he made with all different groups of students, including students of color, including students who are marginalized, and including our students at the high school who are in our LCE class and are dealing with different disabilities, and that connection was really powerful. So my recommendation then is, as a wrap-up, is that Dr. Sansucci put it in the budget, which he's done, and he's going to present on that, and that allows us time for continued board conversation, and that if it were to stay in the budget and voted on by the community, that then in June, before the end of the school year, I'd like a very clear entrance plan. And the reason I have June and not July or August is because I'm going to want student input and staff input and parent input on that entry plan. And I want to be planful for that. So that is my recommendation, and I have a question slide if folks have questions.
Questions?
I have questions.
Calvin?
Okay. Who would the SRO report to and under you?
Sure. So part of the presentation and in the FAQ that I've shared with the board is that they do sort of serve two bosses. They do have to ultimately report to the Monroe County Sheriff Office because they are employed by the Monroe County Sheriff Office. They're also employed and have to report to the Penfield Central School District. That gets worked out in the MOU that would be signed between the Sheriff's Office, the county, and the school district. So we don't have it worked out perfectly, but how we would have it worked out right now is we have Brandon Fox as our security and preparedness manager, and he would be the person that the SRO would work with and report to. Ultimately, and then as well as Alan McNiff. Ultimately, though, when it comes to the evaluation, it would fall under my office and working very closely because Brandon is a counselor on special assignment. Alan is an administrator as a director of facility, but ultimately would come back to me and the board for those decisions on how things went the first year. I will share that one of the things is having Brandon Fox work closely with the SRO is if that person were stationed at the high school, my recommendation is that they're utilized district-wide. So what I can't have is every administrator calling the SRO directly, I need you here, but to call Brandon Fox, and he can sort of be like the gatekeeper on, yes, you want him to come over, him or her, to come over and present to your students or your faculty, what date, I can schedule that. That's sort of the process. But ultimately, you'd be working very closely with Brandon and Alan because they're district-wide, and then they work very closely with me in the business office around sort of evaluation and how things work.
Okay, follow up. So
Sure.
given that he is a deputy sheriff, what are the limitations on what Brandon can tell him to do? Or how will that work?
That's
And
right.
we can have an MRU or whatever.
Yeah, so
Have an understanding.
Yep, so that all gets worked out in the MOU. We've seen some sample MOUs from other districts that have an SRO, and we can assign the SRO's time as long as they're here and tell him the things he has to do. The one caveat is we can't ask him to do something that goes against the oath of a Monroe County deputy.
Obviously.
So, for example, and some of the research around SROs is interesting, but when you dig into it, it's because some states allow the SRO to be involved with school discipline. We do not. The Monroe County Sheriff Office does not. So the SRO would not be giving a student a detention. They would not be suspending a student. That is the job of the administrator. So if I said to the SRO, I want you to, call Tom Putnam and suspend his student, he can't do that. It's outside of his oath of being a police officer. I couldn't say to him, you need to be fair, they use this example, I couldn't say, I don't like you to wear your uniform, you need to wear a polo shirt and slacks. He is required by law to be in his uniform when he's on duty, and so that would be an example of I couldn't tell him what to do.
When would we see this memorandum?
It would, because it is well, first of all, it would have to go through the board approving the budget, the community voting on our budget. If that were approved, then we would go into discussions with Sheriff Baxter and the Monroe County Sheriff Office to work on that MOU. We would have it obviously looked at by our attorney and their attorney. They do have sort of a template because they have SROs in other districts. And then ultimately that would come to the board because of the cost of that contract is about an estimated a little under $100,000. So because of that, it would need board approval, and the board would be able to look at and approve the MOU and the contract.
Last question. In the worst case scenario where something goes wrong, the SRO shoots somebody or does something bad, not the one that we'll pick initially, whatever, what is our liability if something goes wrong in a situation, a parent says, this shouldn't have happened, it was a big accident, and so on. Do we incur a liability as a board?
That's a great question. I would have to dig into it a little bit. I would tell you that in the conversations with Sheriff Baxter, because they are still a Monroe County Sheriff Office deputy, that they would fall under that too.
They primarily fall under that.
Yeah. So it's a question I'd have to ask in terms of liability. Obviously, as a district, when anything happens on our property, we're liable in some form or format, which is why we have insurance and why we work through that. But I would want to, I think, dig into that a little bit in regards to the insurance that would the insurance cover the SRO? I don't want to put Dr. Sansucci on the spot, but I think it's a question we'd have to look into a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Lisa.
I don't have that many questions. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. I'm getting there, sorry. When we're talking about voting, this is going to be similar to how we would, so we're not voting on this separate because
Correct.
It's like a position.
Yes.
So it's being added to the budget like any other position.
Sure.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to make sure
one
that
example
I understood that.
the one example I think helps me is last year the board voted for this current budget we're in to increase the Delphi Rise drug and alcohol counselor from a 0.4 to a 1.0. And so that was a contractual position. We have to have a contract with Delphi. That contract comes to the board for approval because of the cost, and it was just in the budget.
Right,
And so that's why we have sort of precedent in how we do things in regards to if it's a position that's being recommended to the board, then it would be part of that overall budget. But I think that's a really fair question for board members and for the community, that it will be part of the full budget, not a standalone item.
Right.
Yep.
All right, I just want to be clear.
Sure.
And I was curious about staff comments, because the comments that you listed were mostly community or parents, I'm
Yep.
assuming? Right.
I have gotten, I be fair, I got 2 emails from staff.
Yeah.
The first comment on there from one staff member was around just this feeling of no guns at all. So it wasn't, and that staff member was clear that when Deputy Thurston was here, it went well, but just this feeling, sort of philosophical feeling that no gun should be allowed in school, period, whether it's with an officer holding it or obviously a student. So that was one staff member. Another staff member, some of the suggestions I mentioned came from the staff member, that while they had some concerns, they just want to make sure, especially, that we were working towards building a connection with our students of color, our families of color, and making sure that the person who's there is the right fit, that they would work with families, and again, not be there to make things worse, but to be proactive and support. So those were 2. I only got 2 official emails. I have met with a number of teachers and the PEA who are supportive of the SRO hiring. The high school especially, I would say, is overwhelmingly supporting. There are people who don't, but overwhelming, because I think they had Deputy Thurston in the building last year and saw that there was very little issue with it. That they all have stories. I remember Dr. Maloney presented a little bit when she did her school action plan of the positives in the connection in the building that the deputy did because he was here every day for a set amount of time. Oh, yeah.
Any other questions? I would just like to say that this is an important topic that we've been addressing. It goes to the core of our very first district goal, which is create a safe and engaging learning environment. I think we've all taken it seriously. Tom and the district have been very diligent, very thorough on how we've done this, got a lot of input. This is the decision we will make right, we'll make well. I'm very confident in that. And I also appreciate the fact that the community has provided input and hope they continue to do so.
I would just share that if I do get, because I got more emails today, so if I do get any more information, I'll share that with the board as we move forward. Concerns, suggestions, or positives.
I had one more comment, a quick one. So I actually contacted some of my neighbors and said, have you read the Penfield Prestige? And I'm sorry to say that they didn't even know where it was, which I found kind of shocking. And
I would ask them to look in their recycling bin, because it does get mailed to every Penfield family. But
I hate to say it, but even our town supervisor, I talked to him and I said, did you know this? I know Tony. And he had to go look for it. So it bothered me a little bit, but there's nothing we can really do about that. That's too bad, because I think it's a good publication.
I think it's a great publication. I saw Nancy Bradstreet shed a tear in the audience because she is our editor-in-chief of that. I do think, though, beyond this, that it is the world we live in. We get, things come in the mail. Not everybody reads it. They're not always there. The fact is that that is a reality, but we share all this information out, and we try to be as transparent as we can, and we videotape these meetings, and we put them online, and we send the Prestige, and we send emails out from my office to all parents, and we use our social media and our webpage. I can lead a horse to water, but beyond that, I can't ensure that everybody is going to always read what I put out. And I got to tell you, I write okay, but Nancy makes it amazing. So you're really missing out if you're not reading my superintendent message every Prestige. So thank you.
Okay. Budget.
Oh, yes, thanks. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Sansucci, who will talk about the budget for 2021. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I noticed that out in our audience, we have some scouts, and it is getting to be a late hour, and I
think I know they're from Troop 312, and so thank you for being here, and students, thank you for being here, and make sure you thank your parents for bringing you here. If you need to go, please know we will not be offended. You're getting into the budget. It's really exciting. It's numbers and math. But you really did see some cool stuff tonight.
Yes.
But please know if you do need to step out, we totally understand. And it's getting a late night because I'm not going to sign you a note to be late to school tomorrow. So.
And also keep in mind, you're welcome back anytime.
Absolutely.
We'll make sure we have a chair available for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Barb.
Yeah.
All right, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. The superintendent's message in the post is the top of our family reading list.
I'm going to say something is I keep referencing the recycling bin because that's where I have to find it. I have a very supportive family and wife, but I'm always like, I wrote this, my picture's in here. But she hears me talk about it all the time, so I don't think she needs to read it.
Well, as board members, we get two.
You do, yeah. You could share one.
Well, I have. Yeah, we should carry them.
Pass them out to
Right.
people.
All right, sorry, Mark, thank you.
That's all right. Thank you. All right, as Dr. Putnam indicated, tonight's presentation, oops, wrong button. Tonight's presentation is the capital presentation, and I'll explain to you in a bit why it makes sense that the SRO position fits there. I just want to point out, as I always do at this time, that we always take our lead from the district's three goals: academic achievement, partnerships, and fiscal responsibility. I can't think tonight of a better example of a board meeting that demonstrates our commitment to all three of those goals. Certainly academic achievement, certainly partnerships, and now we'll talk a little bit about the piece that reflects fiscal responsibility. We've worked through it. We're moving along. It's always a little amazing to me how quickly the budget season unrolls. So we began in October when we established our budget calendar. We've worked at every board meeting since then. With some presentation on the budget. Began the formal presentations of the budget itself, in the components of the budget itself in January with the administrative budget. At our last meeting, the second January meeting, we talked about the special areas of the budget. So in terms of the instructional budget, so staff development, special education, psychologists, and so forth. And tonight we review the capital portion of the budget. So that includes buildings and grounds, transportation, debt service, and as of tonight also this security function that we've begun to have more focus on and more discussion. Currently, that portion of the budget is about 15% of our total. So this is last year's pie, but it won't change. It will change, but not dramatically. So a fairly a substantial portion. This year, it is increasing by about 11%, driven mostly by debt service. So I'll talk about that when we get there, but also security of plant. So in the past, I've referred to this as buildings and grounds. So maintenance of the buildings, upkeep of our grounds and fields, and we're adding to it security. That's a $17 million portion of our budget. It's up about $1.7 million. And what will have to change as we move forward and get used to this is I've always called it buildings and grounds because it contains two portions of the budget, two areas of the budget: operation of the plant and maintenance of the plant. They have their own coding, their own budget structure. But really, they've always been part of what the state considers central services. We've just never called them that. I've never used the language with you or in public, central services, just because really for us it was buildings and grounds. The appropriate place for a central security function under which an SRO would go is in this portion of the budget. So with that, we're going to make the shift to central service. It's a centralized function. It covers K-12, maintenance of the building, operations, maintenance of the plant, utilities, and so on are all K-12. They cover all of the functions. Also here, of course, debt service. Essentially, this is the upkeep and protection and maintenance of our home, right? It's our debt service, our utilities, and so forth. So I want to begin by talking about what's in that security of plant, that's the formal title, component of the budget. So we've moved the salary. You'll recall that our security and preparedness manager is a counselor on special assignment. So that salary's been moved to this budget. So we're isolating, focusing on that position. I've also included a contractual item because the Monroe County Sheriff's Office charges for the resource officer is a contractual item. We will have that memorandum of understanding, a contract with the county for that SRO. We've included some miscellaneous fees for travel and training and also for supplies. The total, $193,000. You have in your packet how that breaks out in terms of detail. But I just want to show how it fits in with the rest of that portion of the budget, the central services portion of the budget. Operation of the plant are the two tallest bars. You can see they're going up just a little bit, driven mostly by contractual salary increases. Maintenance of the plant, same thing. And now a new bar, a relatively much more modestly sized bar, but security of plants included here as well. When we roll all those things together, this is what that looks like. So central services, which now we know includes the operation and maintenance of the plant as well as security. Student transportation is another important component of this, and I'd like to welcome Gina Chopard, Director of Transportation's with us in the audience tonight. So I also hear replacement of buses. Project funding was in last year's budget, not in the go-forward one. And you can see here that really the most significant increase in this budget is planned increases in debt service as we implement debts associated with our ongoing capital project. That may change. We're still in flux as we move through our planning around that. We have some upcoming meetings where we'll discuss our plans, not just for this component, for the currently ongoing capital project, but also for how that will fit in with future planned projects. So that's remains a bit of a work in progress, but certainly we want to reflect where we're at with our thinking right now. And also a transfer to capital reserves. That would complete the funding of our capital reserve for our upcoming an upcoming capital project. We've always used a portion of capital reserve to offset the costs, the local share costs of our capital projects. If we split this up differently, so same budget, that same approximately $17 million looked at differently, you can see that really here, the only thing that's different in this budget than the other ones we look at as we go along is salaries dominate every piece of this budget. I always say we're every piece of our entire school budget. Schools are a people business. This budget, no different, with the exception, of course, of debt service. So payment of the school's mortgage payment, if you will, is an important component of this. You can also see here the buses, the equipment The budget for equipment, buses, utilities, contractual, and so on, modest changes in those areas. The bump in utilities, or I'm sorry, the bump in contractual items, mostly driven by that SRO line. So I want to focus a little bit on some of the longer range. This is the budget, I think, where in terms of fiscal responsibility, we always say it's important not to budget. If a school district is building its budget on a year by year by year basis, on a 1 year basis, it's doomed for failure. We really need to have that multi-year look, the long-range look at the decisions we make in terms of the future and how they'll impact future budgets as well. This board's been successful at that. You've seen earlier 5-year forecasts. We've talked about reserves. We really try and focus on multi-year planning. That's true in all the components of our budget, but it really comes to the forefront in this one. So we have a plan for bus purchase. We utilize a bus purchase reserve to offset those costs. And we have a plan that we've implemented to build those costs over time back into the local budget, into the general fund budget. So every year for the past number of years, that local shares increased by $80,000. This continues that plan. That'll build in flexibility in the future. We know this is going to be a difficult fiscal year, and I don't project that changing over time. And we've had lots of conversations that no one's repealed the business cycle, so certainly the national expansion is not going to continue forever. So we need to be able to manage through the more difficult and challenging times. This is the kind of planning that allows that to happen. I mentioned earlier that we're including a planned transfer to capital reserve. Those planned transfers are the recommended way, to fund reserves, so we're including that here. And I spoke earlier about our debt service changes. So it's in connection with our elementary school additions project. It's offset. It will be offset by state aid. But our goal here is really to manage debt and aid over time so that we can avoid tax cap impacts. This is one of those potentially dangerous areas of a school budget, right? We're dealing with fairly large numbers. And they impact potentially the calculation of debt and of the receipt of aid does have potentially an impact on your tax cap. So you need to be thoughtful about that and manage it. Our goal has been, and we have been, positive to budget over time. So what I mean by that is when you look at state aid that we receive on capital projects versus the debt we pay in any individual year, we do receive more aid than we do spend on debt. And the reason that happens is because of our cash expenditures. So those capital reserve expenditures count, and we receive aid over time on them. And there's no debt associated with that. So we're able, with some thoughtful planning, to manage that. This budget intends to continue that. One of the conversations that we're having right now is how is that going to fit in? How is where we're at with our planning for this debt? Because we haven't issued bonds yet. We're moving forward with the project because it was partially funded by cash. We're able to move forward. We're spending our cash. As we get to borrowing, the question will be around timing of that and sizing and how will that fit in with future projects, and we're working our way through that right now. So we are in a good spot. This budget reflects where we're at right now. We may tweak a little bit as we move along, and I need the board to be prepared. We don't have lots of time. We need to put our current plan to bed soon. Oops. Oh, and I just said that. Only much more long-windedly. In terms of personnel changes, Again, where they come, they're detailed in your budget, but we are adding staff in this. 2 route drivers and 2 bus aides. So one of those route drivers, an addition of 2 bus drivers, one to relieve overcrowding on runs, and the other because of a change in program at BOCES. BOCES has notified us that they are no longer able to provide us with wheelchair transportation for our in-district students. So we have a number of students who receive wheelchair transportation in-district, and we've contracted with BOCES to provide that, because as you know, we have not maintained a fleet of wheelchair buses. We just got out of that business a number of years ago. BOCES, in part because of the driver shortage, has had to make choices about what they will provide. I mean, that's just the reality of where they're at. So they gave us some warning, not a lot, but enough, that they will still be able to provide our out-of-district wheelchair transportation, but they drew the line at inter-district. When we ordered the buses that will be delivered this summer, we had buses in the pipeline, and we changed our order so that 2 of those will be equipped as wheelchair buses. We'll now need a driver. We'll need route driver. They will be assigned to routes, and we'll need drivers for one of those. So one of these drivers is associated with that. The other to relieve overcrowding. One of those bus aides will be assigned for the wheelchair routing, and then the other one is simply to get us back up to where we have a unassigned bus aide who can help us in covering absences and so on. Right now, we'd planned on for this year, I believe I said in the notes, 12 drivers with 1 unassigned. Right now, all 13 of those drivers are assigned, which means that if somebody's out, there's nobody to ride the bus. So we need to get that back. The other personnel change here, of course, is the security and preparedness manager, and that's really a move to this budget, although it was backfilled elsewhere. So it is really an addition. Also here, this is a change that we talked about earlier when we looked in the earlier portion of the budget. You'll recall that portion went down. It was overall a decreased budget. In part, that was because of a movement of $200,000 from that budget from there to here. That's because the actual expense of this is a transfer to another fund. It's the local share of the summer programs for our students with disabilities. So summer school for students with disabilities primarily funded by the state of New York, but there is a local share, and our share of that is about $200,000. And it's transferred through this budget. So what we've had in the past is I budget it where I thought it made more sense in the piece of the budget where we talk about programs for students with disabilities, but then it would get expensed here. And it just, it doesn't make sense either way, but it lines up in an accounting fashion better here. So we've moved it to where it makes more sense. It's a change in the way we display it rather than a change in program. This is where we're at with regard to the budget overall. So we're moving expeditiously through. You can see the changes for the administrative budget for student support. You can see the slight decrease there. We've talked tonight about buildings and grounds, transportation, debt, and that'll have to change now to central services. Still to come is student programs. So the next meeting will be student programs. That's the single largest. This is the general education portion of our budget, the single largest piece, BOCES programs, and then we finish with benefits, retirement, health insurance, and so on for staff that is in all of those programs. And that's a wrap on the expenditure side of the budget. So we are making progress. At that meeting, we'll also that's the February meeting, will be the instructional program review. We'll then move into BOCES in March. By March 24th, we begin to put it all together. We'll talk about revenue and fund balance. will be estimating state aid by then. It would be very unlikely if we knew at the March 24th meeting what our state aid was. So the state budget's due April 1st, and it traditionally passes, if it passes on time, in the dark of night on April 1st. So the April 20th, the deadline for petitions for board candidates, and then we'll review it one last time and adopt on April 21st. So that's also the night we'll vote on the BOCES administrative budget, do some other administrative things such as the property tax report card, begin our advertising, our notice, send out our communications to the public around budget. The last formal hearings on May 5th and May 19th is the vote this year at the high school from 6 to 9. This, along with all the other documentations available on the district's website. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board? Lisa?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you tell me where the security, before we pulled the security code separate?
Yeah.
Was it part of this budget prior or in a different portion?
By security, I'm not sure what you mean, though. So,
But maybe I misunderstood.
no, we created it. It's a new portion of this budget.
Okay.
So we created the slot for it,
Right.
if you will.
So, but
moved
previous-
Brandon into it.
Right,
and-
so where was he before?
Oh, he was a counselor.
No, I know that, but I mean, where?
Oh, he would have been in Program 1 in the budget that we presented on whoops.
Maybe I'm confused.
That's okay.
Brandon's position
But
as
he's
a
a
security
school-
is brand new. So
Right.
last year, he was a counselor and therefore budgeted as a counselor.
Right, he would have been budgeted in the special areas portion
Okay,
with
I think
students with disabilities.
I thought you were putting other security things in this.
You know, we talked about that.
Okay.
Like, what other before what other
Yeah,
security
I don't
things
know, I
in-
guess that's
We had some conversation about that. So, for example, still in the budget, Alan will, in his budget, in the grounds budget, carries, money for cameras, for example. The high school hall monitors, if we want to consider those security, are carried in the instructional portion of the budget that's upcoming. We thought about moving all of those things, but we elected not to at this time. I think what we will do, rather, and what I suggested, other things came up. So, for example, Alan carries a contract for the alarm system that's in our buildings, for the software that controls our door locks. What do we move here? What makes sense? Where does it make sense to be budgeted? I think is a conversation that we decided would evolve. And really it became almost a communication and a political consideration of, we knew that this was to be a focus on this new program, that we're embarking on this idea of the Security Preparedness Manager and the SRO, and we wanted to call that out and not really muck that conversation up with stuff that's not new, but moved from elsewhere in the budget, and it just didn't make sense. So I think, I just think it would add confusion rather than clarity. But I do think that the purpose of having that separate set of codes is that it provides the district and the board and the community with clarity around, what are you spending on this thing, right? So I think it would be wise over time for us to move, as we have those conversations, as we get used to this new thing, that we start to move those pieces. And what I talked to Alan about is, over the course of this next year, assuming our budget passes and that we've got this established, as we move over the course of this year, as we make those expenses, let's look at where we make them out of. And maybe we make the expense out of this security code, make a budget transfer then from his budget where it was budgeted to cover the expense, and then at year end we'd have a set of realistic expenses. This is what we know. We could use that to budget go forward. I think it would my thinking was that process, that transition would be a little more seamless and a little more, would provide clarity at this time, would be less confusing now, and then would make sense when we get to the next budget cycle. We could say, hey, look, this is what we spent, these are the items that are contained here, and this is what we're proposing for next year. Does that help?
Any other questions? Okay.
That concludes superintendent reports.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Our next item of business is a resolution for the authorization of signage on High School Drive. A motion and a second would be in order at this time.
Second.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Oh, go ahead.
So there'll be discussion?
Yes, we have discussion. I have discussion.
We need to turn your mic on.
Oh, I have to turn my mic on, sorry. I'm trying to find our budget, or I mean our whatever, I don't even know. It's late and I'm tired.
5A.
5A, okay. So I think we wanted to provide some clarity around what we're proposing in the language for this sign and future signs. Does that make sense? So I'm going to propose the
let me
amendment.
interject here.
Okay, you do it. And then I'll do the amendment.
Well, so let me, the point of this resolution is to authorize a resident to install a sign that's on their property, but it's on our road.
Right, so it's specifically for for High School Drive, which is the entrance of the high school. There are residential homes there, but that road is the district road, not the town road. And so if you wanted to put a sign for a home business, you would go to the town, and they would typically approve it as long as it met their standard of approval for signs in the right-of-way of the town road. High School Drive is a district road, and so when the individual went to the town, he said, you got to go to the district, and we don't have any language because we've never had this request before. So the language you see is really focused on kind of following what the town would do. If the town would approve it, we're comfortable to some degree approving it for High School Drive as well, as long as it would be reviewed by that the town would approve it, and it would be always reviewed by Director of Facility. There was some conversation around, do we need to add some more to that?
Right, and the issue is just making sure that we have the ability to some extent govern the nature of the businesses that are available. Again, the town isn't covering that part of it, but as us, since it's in front of our school, we want to be able to govern that, and so that's where the wording could be amended somewhat.
Okay.
So
okay,
the motion would be in order to amend that.
I'm gonna put what am I doing? A new motion?
Read that.
If you look,
Oh, I'm just gonna read the. Okay. I'm gonna amend a proposed resolution to read that resolve that the district authorize placement of signage on High School Drive property that is compliant with the town code, not contrary to the school's interests. That's the new part. And subject to the approval of the Director of Facilities.
So to clarify, you're adding the words "not contrary to the school's interest."
Correct. So I'm making a motion to amend the current motion on the table.
So is there a second for that amendment? Second. Okay. Any discussion on the need for that amendment or the merits of the amendment? Take a vote. All in favor of making the amendment? Any opposed to the amendment? Okay, so we have 5 in favor, 1 opposed. So now that takes us back to the motion for the resolution as amended, which includes the words "not contrary to school's interests."
So, oh no, we don't. We just vote.
Now, is there any further discussion on this resolution? No. So then it would be appropriate for a vote.
No, that last vote was the vote.
Oh, I thought we just voted
We
to
voted
amend the
amended,
language. Then we have to vote again on the whole thing. It's too late for changing the rules.
That's what this resolution is approving.
Or did
I thought it just changed the language.
As
Oh,
amended.
okay,
I thought
Okay.
it just changed the language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
Okay.
Yay.
So we're moving on then? Okay.
I'd like to meet this Roberts with his rules of order.
I would like to meet
Some
Robert, too.
questions for Roberts.
He's got a shingle right up next to Murphy's Law.
The next item, let me get to that, is to accept the single audit report for the year ending June 30th, 2019. Now, as a normal protocol, so there's going to be a motion and a second to accept the single audit report. Is the motion be in order?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Okay. Now,
Now I'm going to make my motion, right?
Kim?
Because the audit committee was canceled due to low enrollment. So we would like to put a motion on the table to postpone this for the audit committee to review and then bring it back to us with their full recommendation.
And is there a second for that motion? To postpone this until,
Second.
any discussion on that?
If I could just explain what happened, so, do you mind if I?
I think, yep. Do you mind, Mr. Elledge, if Mark Sansucci just gives a quick overview?
That would be wonderful.
Thank you. So our process, our procedure is that the district's audit committee reviews the audit, reviews audits, and then as well as our management suggested corrective action plan. They have the time to go into it in depth. They have lots of conversation, and then they recommend to the board that they approve it. In this case, we had a number of people unable to make the meeting. We didn't have a quorum, so they can't fulfill that function. When we looked at rescheduling, we realized that we have an upcoming, a fairly quickly upcoming audit committee meeting, so we decided to postpone these audits to be reviewed at that next audit committee meeting. But I didn't want to just leave it. I didn't want to, we have the audits, we have them in hand. I didn't want the board to not have them, you know what I mean? So I felt like the best course of action, and also we needed to submit them online. So I didn't want to go ahead and submit and have the board not have them. Mm-hmm. So I think to honor our process, the best course of action was for the board to receive the audits. You've done that, but to postpone action on them until you can hear from the audit committee at a future meeting. So that's what we're trying to, I think, fumble our way through a little bit here.
We're doing a fine job.
You're doing a great job.
It's really late.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? All those in favor? Opposed? So 6 in favor, none opposed. The next
We gotta do it again.
topic is the extra classroom activity funds finance report. An annual inspection audit report for the extra classroom activity funds for the year ending June 30th, 2019 by Raymond Wagner, CPA, PC, has been provided to the Board of Education for review. The report and management responses will be reviewed for acceptance by the district's audit committee at their March 5th, 2020 meeting. Deputy Superintendent for Business, Mark Sansucci, is present to answer any questions that the board may have. If the board approves, the following motion is in order. So is a motion and a second to accept this report.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this audit
So a
thing
motion to postpone this audit
as well, given the
And
prior
for
discussion.
the same reason. Any second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed?
See?
Look at, we're so good
You got
at
it
this.
down.
Third time's the charm.
Do you have any more? Now I know what we're, now that we know what we're doing.
Let's get
really.
some more in there, yes.
All right.
Okay. Catherine's probably yelling at the screen right now. So for policy review, we have a number of policies for second read. They are second reading and approval, 5440, information security breach and notification, 7555, Dignity for All Students Act. There's two regulations associated with it, but we don't vote on those. You see those there. I'd like a motion and a second to accept the above policies as presented.
So moved.
Second? Are any comments or input on that?
Does anybody want to postpone it?
Wait, let me get out my.
Robert, there have been no comments on those. There, no feedback.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And the motion is passed 6-0. The BOCES candidates are going to be up for election. The following BOCES board members' terms end the end of June 30th, 2020. Kristen DeTurk, which is a resident of Honeyway Falls, Lima School District. Robert Genther, a resident of the Pittsford Central School District. Frederick Shippey, a resident of the Penfield Central School District. The BOCES board members are elected by their component board and voted on the same day designated for the vote on the tentative administrative budget. This year, the BOCES administrative budget vote is April 21st, 2020, and will occur at a regularly scheduled meeting. You have no action on that, correct? Okay, committees. We have the Labor Relations Committee. Barb, do you want to speak on that?
Yes, it was a very, very interesting meeting. We had to be in a very small room because there was a conflict with our room, so they weren't able to use the whiteboard or for presentation, so it was more like a panel discussion. But what it was on was things that 4 school districts are doing within Monroe County to for recruitment and hiring for both education staff, support staff, bus drivers, and other positions within the districts. And it was it was Brockport, it was Gates Chili, it was Pittsford, and it was Rush Henrietta. And there were a lot of interesting facts that they brought out. Just to name a few things, we have heard in recent years that young people going into the education field has been declining at the university piece. They were pleased to announce that actually in the local colleges and universities here, the numbers have been going up in both incoming freshman and sophomore classes. That's not to say they're going to stay there, but that the numbers are up. The panelists also shared that the majority of Monroe County school districts, our HR people are working more with the colleges and trying to get in there to work with, as Barb is shaking her head yes, for the support staff, psychology, I think social workers and counselors as well as, and then they did talk on the speech pathology issue, which is more a federal thing, and I can speak to that because the American Speech Hearing and Language Association, they dictate how many students a university can take for their grad program.
Really?
Oh, really? Yes. Don't get me started on this. We'll be here for another 3 hours. Because undergrad programs can take as many as they want. And then they have nowhere to go if they're not in. So it's very sad that ASHA is, to me, is treating speech language pathologists in the educational setting as second class to the medical profession. I did not renew my ASHA certifications, so I just want to tell you that. So I'm done with them. But it was very, very interesting what they're doing, and they were representative, I think, about the school district. So I took a lot of notes.
Thank you. Information exchange. Emily.
Yes, so there's a presentation by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Never used this thing. So they were just giving data on Monroe County, and then they provided different resources that the districts can use, as well as families can use in their homes, as far as educating children on certain situations and what they should do. And it was very, very, I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was great. It was information that, you know, I didn't even think of, you know, and things that I can go home and talk to my kids about. So it's good.
Yep, thank you. And the last order of business is the Audit Committee Charter. Sort of just went away there. There we go. On October 22nd, or at the October 22nd, 2019 Board of Education meeting, the vote to approve the Penfield Audit Committee Charter was postponed to this meeting, February 4th, 2020. The Audit Committee's January 23rd meeting was canceled. Therefore, committee members were unable to review and adopt the Audit Committee Charter with the board's recommended language revision. The next Audit Committee meeting will be held on March 5th, 2020. A motion and a second would be in order to amend our previously adopted motion to now read that we will postpone this matter until the March 10th, 2020 board meeting. I have a motion and a second. Okay. And a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? You're already getting your hands up there. That's any opposed? That's 6 in favor, none opposed. And a motion would be in order to adjourn in a second. The motion at 9:28. And a second? All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
You have this all down here.